All right, so welcome to another deep dive. And today's topic, I think, is going to be a fun one.
Yeah, this should be interesting.
Yeah, so someone sent us this article called uh, 10 Most Famous Walls in the World.
Oh, okay.
And we thought, instead of just going through a dry list of walls like a lot of these articles do, let's really sort of unpack what makes these walls famous,
Right.
what their stories tell us about, you know, the people that built them and the times in which they were built, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it and it's like 10 walls. Yeah, but it's really 10 like snapshots into different points in history and all around the world.
Right.
So you've got really ancient walls, all the way up to much more modern ones and the reasons for building them vary wildly too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Uh,
and that's really, I think, what we want to explore today, right? Is like, what can we learn from these structures
yeah.
about the past, about ourselves?
Yeah.
What kind of insights do they offer
Ab-
into humanity? So I guess to kick things off, why don't we start with one that probably everyone's heard of? I mean, it's kind of like the poster child for famous walls, right? And that's the Great Wall of China.
The Great Wall of China. Yeah, it's pretty much the ultimate defensive wall, I guess you could say.
Right.
And the article mentions the 14th century as a main period of construction, but like
Hmm.
a lot of these things that actually had been being built for centuries before that.
Right.
And the main reason was to protect the northern borders of the Chinese Empire from, nomadic tribes and invaders.
Right. And I mean, it's called the Great Wall for a reason, right?
Right.
It's absolutely massive.
Oh, yeah.
It stretches for something like 8,850 kilometers.
Wow.
Like, you could drive across the entire United States and you still wouldn't have covered the entire length of this thing.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It's pretty mind-boggling. And, what's really impressive to me is not just the length of it, but, like, the terrain it covers.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
mountains, deserts, grasslands. They didn't let
Yeah.
anything stop them.
Right, and think about the logistics involved too.
Right.
I
Go
mean, this
ahead.
was before, modern construction equipment and stuff. They were doing this by hand essentially.
Yeah.
So the effort and the manpower that went into building this thing is just it's hard to comprehend, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, there's that whole myth about it being the only man-made structure visible from space
Right.
with the naked eye,
Right.
which isn't true, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think we have to debunk that one, but
Yeah.
it just goes to show how much it kind of captured people's imaginations, right?
Right.
This idea of this massive structure that could be seen from space.
Yeah, it speaks to like the scale of it, I guess.
Absolutely.
So from a wall that's, meant to keep people out,
Mm-hmm.
let's switch gears a little bit and talk about one that draws people in for very different reasons, and that's the Western Wall in Jerusalem.
Yeah, the Western Wall or the Wailing Wall.
Right.
It holds immense religious significance in Judaism.
Right.
And our source dates it back to, the end of the Second Temple period, around 19 BC,
Okay.
which is really interesting because, to understand why this wall is so important, you have to understand the significance of the Holy Temple itself.
Right.
Right. So this wasn't just any temple. This was like the central place of worship in ancient Judaism.
Wow.
It housed the Ark of the Covenant, and it was like the focal point of their religious life.
So this wall is like a remnant of that.
Exactly, yeah. It's part of the western wall of that original temple complex.
So it's not just a wall, it's like a piece of history.
Yeah, and a very sacred piece of history for, millions of people around the world.
And the article mentions that it's the most visited site in Jerusalem,
Yeah.
which is pretty incredible when you think about all the historical and religious sites that are in that city.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, clearly it's a place that holds a lot of meaning for people and continues to draw them in. So let's jump ahead quite a bit in history now and talk about a wall that has a very different kind of significance, a much more recent one, and that's the Berlin Wall.
The Berlin Wall, yeah. That's a really powerful example of a wall that, represents division.
Right.
And it was built in 1961, right in the middle of the Cold War.
Yeah, and it's interesting because unlike the Great Wall, which was about keeping out, external enemies, the Berlin Wall was about keeping people in.
Exactly. It was about preventing East Berliners from escaping to West Berlin.
Right, and it really became a symbol of like this ideological divide, right, between the communist East and the democratic West.
Yeah, it was a very physical manifestation of that divide. I mean, you can imagine what it must have been like to have a city literally divided by a wall.
Yeah, and the stories of families being separated and people risking their lives to escape over it.
Oh.
It's really heartbreaking. And then, of course, there's the iconic fall of the wall in 1989, which really signaled, the beginning of the end for the Soviet Union.
Yeah, and it's amazing to think that, pieces of that wall still stand today as memorials and tourist attractions.
Right. It's a reminder of that period of history and also hopefully a reminder of, the importance of freedom and unity.
Absolutely.
So from a wall steeped in 20th century history, let's go way back to ancient times and talk about the walls of Troy.
The walls of Troy, yeah, this is one that's really shrouded in legend.
Right.
The article dates them back to the 13th century BC.
Okay.
And, their fame really comes from the story of the Trojan War, right?
Or,
This epic 10-year siege that the city supposedly withstood.
it's amazing to think that, these walls might have actually witnessed those events.
Right, and that there are still remnants of them that you can visit today.
It really kind of blurs the lines between myth and history.
It really does.
So from ancient Greece, let's move on to the might of the Roman Empire and talk about Hadrian's Wall in England.
Hadrian's Wall, yeah, this is another really impressive example of Roman engineering.
Right.
It was built to protect the northern border of Roman Britain from the Picts in Scotland,
Okay.
and it's considered the longest wall in Europe.
Wow.
It stretches for 117 kilometers, which is about 73 miles.
So it's even longer than the Berlin Wall.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, and it really shows, how determined the Romans were to secure their territories.
Right.
Like, they weren't messing around when it came to defending their borders.
Yeah, they built to last, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So from one massive wall to another, let's talk about the walls of Skikanth in Croatia.
The walls of Skita. Okay, this one, I'll admit, I wasn't as familiar with.
Yeah, me neither until I read this article.
But they're really quite impressive. They were built in the 15th century, and they were meant to protect the city of Dubrovnik.
Okay.
But what's unique about them is that they actually connect two cities. They stretch for 5.5 kilometers.
So like an entire wall connecting two settlements. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, and they're the second longest walls in Europe.
Wow.
So, they don't get as much attention maybe as some of the others, but they're definitely worth mentioning.
Absolutely.
And, it kind of shows how important maritime trade and defense were in that region at the time.
Right, because Dubrovnik was a major port city.
Exactly.
So these walls were really crucial for protecting their economic interests.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's journey back to the ancient world again, this time to the walls of Babylon.
The walls of Babylon, now those are legendary.
Right.
They date back to around 575 BC.
Okay.
And they were meant to protect the city of Babylon, which was, one of the most important cities in the ancient world.
Right, the cradle of civilization and all that.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating about these walls is that they weren't just for defense. They were also a symbol of the city's power and wealth.
Right.
Like, they were meant to impress and intimidate visitors.
I mean, we have to talk about the Ishtar Gate.
Oh, yeah. The Ishtar Gate was incredible. It was one of the main entrances to the city, and it was decorated with all these glazed bricks and these intricate depictions of animals.
Sounds beautiful.
It was, and it was considered one of the wonders of the ancient world.
Wow.
So you can imagine, arriving at the city and seeing these massive walls and then this incredible gate. It must have been quite an experience.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
All right, so let's shift continents now and talk about the Great Zimbabwe Walls.
The Great Zimbabwe Walls. Okay, so these are located in what is now Zimbabwe,
Right.
and they were part of a city that was the capital of a kingdom during the Iron Age.
Okay.
And, the article doesn't give us specific dates for the walls themselves, but their existence tells us a lot about the society that built them.
Right, like they were clearly a sophisticated culture.
Yeah, they had the knowledge and the resources to build these impressive structures.
And the desire to create a defined space for their city.
Exactly.
All right, so let's hop over to South America now and talk about Sacsayhuaman in Peru.
Sacsayhuaman. Okay, that's a mouthful.
It is, yeah, but it's a really fascinating site.
It is.
So it's a walled complex near Cusco, which was the capital of the Inca Empire.
Right.
And what's really incredible about these walls is the way they were constructed.
Oh, yeah, the stonework is unbelievable.
Like these massive stones fitted together perfectly without any mortar.
Yeah, you can't even slip a knife blade between them.
It's amazing.
And they did this all at an altitude of over 3,700 meters.
Wow.
So, think about the challenges they faced just getting those stones up there and then fitting them together so precisely.
It's mind-blowing.
It really is, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site for good reason.
Absolutely. So for our final wall, let's come back to the present day and talk about one that serves a very different purpose than any of the others we've discussed, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial.
So this isn't a wall in the traditional sense, right?
Right. It's not about keeping people out or defending
It's
anything.
a memorial.
Exactly. It's a way of honoring those who served in the Vietnam War.
And those who died in the war and those who are still missing in action.
Yeah, it's a place for remembrance and reflection.
And it's so powerful in its simplicity, right? Just these
Yeah.
black granite panels with the names of the fallen etched into them.
Yeah, it's very understated but incredibly moving.
Absolutely. And I think it speaks to how the idea of a wall can evolve, right? It can be a barrier, a symbol of division, but it can also be a place for healing and remembrance.
Yeah, it's a really interesting contrast to some of the other walls we've talked about.
So there you have it, 10 walls spanning thousands of years and countless stories.
Yeah, and each one giving us a glimpse into a different time and a different culture.
And I think what's really fascinating is that even though these walls were built for different reasons and in different places, they all speak to some common human experiences,
Right.
like our need for security, our desire to create boundaries, our impulse to commemorate important events.
And our ingenuity in overcoming challenges.
Exactly. So as you've been listening to this, I'm curious, which of these walls has kind of stuck with you the most?
Mm.
Which one maybe sparked your imagination or made you want to learn more?
Interesting to think about what draws us to certain walls and what they represent to us.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And if you're interested in exploring other historical topics or mysteries, let us know, and maybe we'll do a deep dive on them in the future.
Yeah, we're always looking for new avenues to explore.
All right, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us,
Thanks for listening.
and we'll see you next time.
See you later.